We are going to take a quick look at the landscape of smart city development as we navigate the complexities of urban growth and tech advancement. Having a strong, robust smart city strategy has never been more crucial. And so when we looked at having a session on hitting pause, reframing what smart cities even mean, and the critical aspects of essential keys, elements to smart city strategies, there was no one else that I would call on than Brook and Anna. So Brook and Anna are joining us today from Delos Delta. Delos Delta is a long-term member of Smart Cities Council, an industry leader who work on smart city and digital transformation. They work with cities, governments, developers, universities, companies, organizations, so really everyone, to get the best from digital initiatives and really dig into productivity to drive creativity, sustainability, profitability, all of these great things. Key is that Delos Delta really focus on cutting through hype and focusing on deriving value from digital initiatives with sustainable strategic solutions. So I'm going to hand over now to Brook and Anna. I'll be in the chat section, so if you have any questions, just pop them in there or in the question section, and we will work to get to those as we go. Take it away, Brook.
Great. Thanks so much, Robin. Thank you all for joining us. I know we've got some people from right across Australia and New Zealand, but also globally. So really appreciate you all coming to here today or watching the recording online. I would also, Brooke and I will introduce ourselves a little bit more, but thank you, Robin, for the introduction in just a moment. And we'll also go backwards and forwards in terms of speaking today. So you'll get to hear from both of us, not just me, lucky you. So in terms of, I just want to acknowledge country and acknowledge that we are coming to you from the lands of the Boonwurrung and Wurundjeri people here in Melbourne and the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people up in Canberra, but acknowledging also that we are in a digital meeting and that we're all coming from different lands today. So we'd just like to pay our respects to the traditional owners and any elders past and present. So today we will bring you a range of experiences and observations on on how to get the most out of smart cities, particularly from that strategic planning and strategy perspective. So we'll go through this agenda, the process, maturity, what are we really being people-centric, sort of immersing our strategic planning and smart city thinking, how we're going about planning and development, taking a bit more of a portfolio approach, engaging in that executive leadership and visibility aspects of smart cities, how we can best balance technology and life and the fast-moving pace of technology, and just trying to shift our mindset a little bit in terms of smart city planning, and finally just acknowledging some of the human discomforts that have come through particularly over the past couple of years, and then finally where we're at in terms of externality and bringing together our smart city strategy for a wider audience. So as Robin mentioned, my name's Anna Wilson. I'm the General Manager at Delos Delta, and I have been working in smart cities for the last 7 years with clients right across Australia and internationally, both local government clients and private sector clients, but of course with industry organisations such as Smart Cities Council. So it really is a pleasure to be here. I'll let my colleague Brook also introduce himself and some of the experiences that he brings to today's session as well.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Robin. Good to see you all colleagues once again online, and also those who are joining us via the recording. So I'm Brook, I'm the Managing Director and CEO of Delos Delta. This just gives you a bit of an image of where we sort of draw our perspectives from today. I've been the Director of Smart Cities for the ACT Government a number of years ago now. I was also lucky enough to be a Churchill Fellow studying smart cities around the world. And as Anna mentioned, we've worked with hundreds of clients right across Australia and internationally to help with their smart city strategy, delivery, evaluation, fine-tuning. I've also been president of the Australian Smart Communities Association as well. So we like to think that in terms of smart city strategy and delivery, we've got a fair bit of knowledge and experience to share. Hopefully that is manifest today, and we welcome any questions and discussion along the way. Back to you, Anna.
Thanks, Brooke. So as Brooke mentioned, we're management consultants right across the field of consulting, but we are most well known for our work within smart cities and supporting governments and private sector organisations to achieve their smart city aspirations. But we do bring a range of perspectives from other areas and industries, including in data management, innovation, and more broadly organisational reform, economic development and analysis, and including financial analysis and governance, and the overarching sort of role of organisations. In terms of our smart city strategy expertise, it is wide and varied. We have developed hundreds of smart city strategy documentations for government clients in particular, and some are successful, some are not. And we'll be sharing some of those lessons that we've learned along the way. But we do really try and work hard with our clients to make sure that we are supporting the longevity of their smart city aspirations and the value that smart cities bring to their organisations. A couple of highlights here in terms of work that has received some recognition. North Sydney Council's Smart City Strategy was highly commended back in 2022. The City of Greater Geelong in 2020 and 2022. The City of Casey in 2023, and Canberra, as Brooke was mentioning, his work in the ACT was named the #3 global city in 2023 and 2024. Brooke, we also bring our expertise and experiences from our Atlas Telios program, our maturity program, but I might hand over to Brooke just to talk a little bit more about this one.
Yeah, so just quickly, colleagues, so our philosophy, and this is drawn from our experience working within government, but also looking at governments around the world, has taught us very well that those that take more of a maturity building approach rather than an activity-oriented approach do better over the medium to longer term, and have that legacy embeddedness of smart city thinking and activity right across the organisation. So we built up the Atlas Telios method over the last 7 years with many participants, thousands of inputs and interviews to generate a maturity assessment process, which we'll be talking more about through this presentation, and showing a few of the highlights of some of the insights and the observations that we've made through that process.
Great, thanks, Brooke. So that's a little bit about what some of the areas that we've been working in and some of the experiences and observations that we'll bring to today's discussion. So without further ado, we'll jump straight into some of our key areas that we're observing. So developing an effective smart city strategy involves hard work, as I'm sure you are all aware. It's not just about the outputs and the methods, but it is the ability for the process to support awareness, to support buy-in, to support partnership formation, communication, and risk identification. So in reality, anyone can develop a smart city strategy, but if it is to be effective and it is to be valuable to an organisation, it needs to be able to deliver a whole range of ongoing support as well as the strategy itself. So the process is just as important as the output. Brooke, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to this one before we move to the next observation?
I think exactly that, Anna, and the common thing that we see is smart city strategies sometimes getting pumped out very quickly. They look great in graphic design. They have tremendously long lists of really exciting projects and initiatives that are really sophisticated, and everyone, gets very geared up for good things to happen, and it then tends to fall away pretty rapidly because there hasn't been that sort of investment in these critical inputs, as Anna suggested, building buy-in, building awareness, building a mandate, community license for the activities, building those partnerships, and so forth and so on. So, the process is just as important as the product in terms of strategic thinking for smart cities, smart communities, smart regions. Thanks, Anna.
Excellent. So, Brooke, understanding maturity, as we've already mentioned, our Atlas Teleos program has provided us with some insights, but perhaps to start us off with a little bit of theory, Brooke.
Thanks, Anna. And I think some of you might have seen this slide before, but I do like to share it because there is a very strong tendency in this space to get really, really active with projects and initiatives and outputs in the smart city space. Here's our Wi-Fi, here's our living lab, here's this data collection, here's our online data sharing platform, etc., etc. So you tend to see a big flurry of activity without, in our view and our experience, which tells us that the necessary investment in organisational infrastructure, change management, documentation, procedure, process, governance, guidelines, performance and accountability frameworks, controls, all that sort of paraphernalia that goes with the business of government, the business of governance, the business of managing and organising and operating a city. So, you know, there is a tendency that we've seen over time for certain cities or governments to become shooting stars, whole bunch of smart city activity very quickly, and then it drops off over time. The high maturity trajectory, in our view, is to not to over-invest in too much activity, too many projects up front, but to invest in some of that organisational reform. The end result is that those organisations that take that high maturity trajectory tend to spread smart city activity across their organisation rather than condensing it and consolidating it into a particular team or particular unit in the organisation. And for those of you who might remember, fondly or otherwise, your high school calculus, you can imagine that the area under the curve for an entity with the maturity focus on the diagram on the right-hand side versus the entity with an activity focus, there is ultimately much more activity across the organisation from maturity focus than an activity focus. So with that said, Anna, I think there's another slide to talk about. So where we tend to get some pretty early indications of an organisation, a city, a consortium that has low or, let's say, beginning smart city maturity, you tend to see long laundry lists of smart city projects, which look really exciting on paper, most of which never come to fruition and most of which are way too sophisticated for the organisation to actually deliver. Lots of events and lots of posts on LinkedIn, lots of talk and chatter and excitement, probably less sort of rolling up the sleeves and getting lost in the business of actually embedding smart technology in the organisation. Tendency to chase after magic beans, that is the shiny new things that we all our eyes tend to get taken by occasionally. A bit of a thought of main character energy, that is to say that, oh, technology is the be all and end all. We need to push it here, showcase it there, not embedding it in broader service reform, assets and community partnerships. A focus on chasing grants, technical fascinations, which I've probably already mentioned, disconnection, as I said, from service process and regulatory reform, which tends to be either an accelerator or a constraint for the adoption of smart tech, and a sense also of insider outsider views. That is to say that, we're the smart city team, we're going to drive this, and anyone who's in other teams, maybe traditional ICT team or traditional service lines, you're not doing smart city innovation stuff. So, you know, you go and do the boring business as usual stuff. We'll take care of the innovation. That to our mind, in our experience, is a sign of low or early or beginning maturity. And that's not a bad thing in and of itself, but just something to keep an eye out for. Just something to keep an eye out for, that we need to move beyond some of these sort of symptoms and indicators of activity and maturity and move to something that's higher maturity and is more sustainable within an organisation. So just going on, I'll just quickly give you a bit of a highlight, snapshot of the last Atlas Teleos cohort maturity assessment. It's just generally, this is a notional city, Utopos. They're not a real city. We just put them here so as not to identify any of our participants. Generally speaking, going through the process, you get this sort of output. And on the next slide, I believe, Anna. So this is from the last cohort. So this is real data. Okay, so we had a cohort of cities and organisations go through to measure their smart city maturity at the same time. What you're seeing there is the median maturity result for that particular cohort, and you can start to see here that there are certain areas that cities or organisations generally do well in, and other areas that they do less well in. So governance and leadership, resourcing and resilience, evaluation and learning tend to be areas that are done less well. Strategy and planning tends to be done very well. Relationships and collaboration tends to be something that organisations focus on, as well as capability and culture. Can I also say here, colleagues, in terms of interpreting these results, this was a very high-performing cohort. We had a lot of leaders from Australia, New Zealand, and around the world here, organisations and governments that have been in the smart city space for some time. If we just took a random sample of organisations in terms of their smart city maturity, you'd see much lower results. Okay, so please don't take this as a population sample. This is a point in time, specific cohort-based level of results. If you'd like to see where your organisation sits in relation to this assessment, just give us a call. On you go, Anna. So just on this one, in terms of reimagining smart cities, if you will, I mean, a fantastic title, Robin. I feel like we can only fail with such a title, because that's a very a big topic to consider. But one thing that we've noticed over the many years that we've been working on smart cities on is that I think it's fair to say that early days, it's well acknowledged that there was quite a technology orientation, the art of the possible. If technology can do it, then we should try it. Let's see if it works, and let's play around with it. To probably the current mode of thinking, or at least over the last 4 or 5 years, a lot of talk about being people and community centric and trying to put people back at the centre of smart city thinking, and making sure that we're doing things that have meaning for people and the community. And that's been really useful from our perspective, but it does seem to me to have led to a bit of an arms race and a bit of a comparative fest of who is the most people-centric. No, we've got this component included in our smart city strategy. No, our projects only do X, Y, Z. So it's almost become an exercise in, dare I say it, virtue signalling. Where I think the conversation needs to evolve to is beyond sort of, yes, we're people-centric. I mean, as if we're not. Anyone who's not in the business of government or managing cities, it's not people-centric, probably should be out of the business to start off with. But to something that's more, in our mind, people and planet positive. So these things that are proven, that are impactful, that are demonstrated as delivering results, and that deliver sustained and ongoing positive change in our environment, social outcomes, economic outcomes. So it's an evolution over time from the possible, where things were tech-oriented, to the desirable, where we're more people-centric, to something in our mind that's more meaningful. It's proved, it's having impact, or people and planet positive. So if we're talking about the strategic evolution or philosophizing about smart cities, as you will, this is sort of an evolution that we've observed and that we think is a useful paradigm to spark conversations and to spark thinking about what we're doing in the smart city space.
Thanks, Brooke. So in terms of some of the other observations that we've been seeing, we've noticed that smart cities is permeating not just within small teams, but also right across organizations through the strategic planning frameworks, but also through dedicated documents. So there's that sort of broader view of strategic planning within local government in particular, or governments, but also through those dedicated strategies and plans. We recently completed a scan of a jurisdiction or an area of Australia, and it showed that there was an increase in dedicated smart city strategies over the last few years, but also an increase in people thinking about smart cities in their broader strategic planning frameworks. So thinking right at the highest level of strategic planning in council plans, strategic community plans, etc. So we found that 70% of local governments in this particular area were showing evidence of of smart city thinking within their broader strategic planning, but that 32% also had a dedicated strategy to support long-term smart city aspirations. So yeah, we're certainly seeing that it is starting to really immerse, not just in a sort of closed fashion, but right through organisations. Brooke, anything else to add in there?
I think it just speaks for itself into those sort of trends that there's an increasing amount of people with and organisations with a dedicated approach, but also starting to let it permeate and be manifest in their broader integrated strategic planning framework, which is as it should be. It's the same thing happened with sustainability over the last 20 to 30 years as well. We still see a dedicated focus on sustainability environmental management plans, but we still see that triple bottom line or quadruple bottom line thinking coming through right across the suite of documentation. And so to us, that's a signal, a strong signal of increasing maturity in this space, but also a broader acceptance of the power and the need of a dedicated smart city strategy as well.
So moving on to planning and developing smart cities, Brooke, perhaps want to give a bit of an update here.
So colleagues, those of you who are sort of in the Australian-New Zealand sphere might have also been aware of a project that we're working on with a range of partners, particularly NBN and Urbis, other partners including University of New South Wales, Planning Institute of Australia, Australian Smart Community Associations, Property Council of Australia, UDIA, and of course we always continue to collaborate and talk with our friends at the Smart Cities Council through this process as well. But we're looking at how smart technology and smart city thinking is permeating or otherwise the planning and development sector. Our thesis being that if we want to build a smart nation, smart cities, smart communities, smart towns, smart region, we need to build it from the ground up and embed it in the planning and development of our cities and places. So through this process, we've talked to developers, local governments, state government, the Australian government, industry associations, stakeholders right across Australia, both digitally and face-to-face. And some of the, just a snapshot of the stats here are pretty interesting in terms of if we ask people about if Australia is missing out on the benefits of technology, innovation and data in our development sphere, we're getting a lot of people saying, majority of people saying that they strongly agree that we are leaving value on the table. That is to say, we are not optimally integrating smart technology into our developments. And then in terms of the effectiveness of collaboration in this environment, noting that it is a multi-stakeholder environment, in terms of asking, is there effective collaboration, a smart development between private sector, government and other stakeholders? Very few people are agreeing. It's mostly disagreement strongly, or disagreement, just general disagreement, or neutral. So that is to say, we're really not seeing the level of collaboration in smart development that we would hope to see. Some of the key issues here in terms of accelerating smart development, some of the barriers that we got from the engagement, unclear return on investment, high upfront costs or the perception of high upfront costs, resistance to change and limited risk appetite within the industry, lack of internal knowledge and capability, complexity of integration with existing systems. And some of the actions that we're exploring to accelerate smart developments, standardising, collaboration, asset sharing and asset handover processes, clearer mapping of smart tech possibilities, demonstrations and prospectuses of the return on investment, sharing successful case studies, including pilot results, and continuing to foster collaboration between private and public sector. But again, I think the point is here in terms of reimagining smart cities, we've got to move beyond the paradigm of it's a point project. We've actually got to embed it into our large scale building, planning and development activities and make sure it's integrated right from the start so that we're not having to retrofit and becomes more of a included in the buildings and the spaces and the places from the start.
Thanks, Brooke. So in terms of taking a bit of a portfolio approach to smart cities, we've covered this, I think, across some of our insights already, but there does tend to be a trap to focus primarily on projects and initiatives where there is definitely value and as we've already demonstrated, in focusing on a range of other enablers that can best support those projects, but also that don't require quite as much potential investment or resources to achieve. So there, in particular, we have seen a trend that, as Brooke's already mentioned, that there tends to be a bit of a low capability in demonstrating or assessing or communicating the impact of smart city initiatives, both with executive leadership and with communities. So there's certainly a need to focus on not just the projects and the delivery of projects, but the range of enablers that support them as well. Brooke, again, anything else that you wanted to add in there?
And I think we can keep moving through. I think we're getting to our final few slides, colleagues, and those who are listening online. So don't hesitate to jump in the chat, ask some questions there, and Robin will go through that. Is that how we're going to work it, Robin? Does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, there is one question that might be worth just asking now, because I think you're about to come to this section. So it's from George, and he's asked, for organizations considering a smart city strategy, what is your advice about the starting point? As in, what are the foundational elements that need to be put in place, and just how to get going?
Well, the thing I would say is that if you see the need for a smart city strategy, and we obviously believe that there is value in it, and we see that a lot of our clients have value. The starting point for us, from our perspective, would be to have those conversations with your leaders, both elected officials and executive leaders, to put the case to them, to indicate the proliferation of smart city thinking, the necessity of it, because it isn't going away and is only getting more prominent and is only getting more disruptive in how we govern and build our smart cities. Getting that initial buy-in to actually invest in a strategy, to spend the time doing the strategy, that to me is the starting point, because once you've got that mandate and that buy-in and that understanding that this is valuable, then you have the ability to go off on the journey, whether you engage someone like Delos Delta to help you, whether you do it internally, whether you sort of do something that's more integrated with your ICT strategy, or you put it as a module in your broad strategic plan. They are all relevant and useful pathways, but you've got to have the buy-in and the mandate. You've got to have people excited. You've got to have people thinking, hang on a second, if we don't have this smart city strategy, we could face a whole bunch of risks that we see coming over the horizon. So that to me, and I'm sorry if that seems a bit boring and a bit obvious, but I can't tell you how many times we get people saying, oh yeah, we're going to have a smart city strategy. And I say, well, have you talked to your executives and your elected officials about that? And they say, oh, no. So, and then of course they don't either never get there, or it's 12 to 18 months later down the track that they finally get the go ahead to do that. So might be a really boring and basic answer, but that is just the facts of the matter. Without that mandate, you aren't going to get very far with a smart city strategy or equivalent.
Perfect. Thank you.
So, and I think this is still, sorry, Robin,
No,
was there another question?
No, perfect. Go for it. Continue.
Yeah, we can talk more about that offline too, George, and colleagues as well. So one of the things in terms of strategy in the smart city space that we're noticing is that we observe probably not insufficient executive visibility. And I say this as a former executive in government, okay? And that one of the perils of smart city activity is handing it off to your officers and just imagining that they're going to run with it. Because the officers will run far and they'll run fast, but they're going to hit some brick walls. They're going to hit some brick walls and they're going to need executive visibility. They're going to need executive buy-in. They're going to need the executives rolling up the sleeves to punch through these barriers. So I could speculate as to why I'm not seeing as much executive visibility in this space as I think is necessary. One of the reasons I think, and I say this as a former executive, is executives say that they like engaging with risk, but actually don't. And they're very happy to sort of sidestep a little bit, hand the risk over to their officers. If it's successful, great, you'll see the executives gravitate towards the project. If it's less than successful, well, then that's the officer's fault. They were probably a bit rogue. Now, that might be a little bit uncharitable, but I think, as I said, from somebody who's been in government for many, many years, has acted as an executive and as an officer, this is a very common paradigm, not just in the smart city space. So I would encourage everyone who is working on smart city activity to really make sure that your executives are not just actively involved, but are visibly involved, so there is quite clear understanding that this has mandate and this has executive support and it has executive sponsorship.
So in terms of technology, we all understand that technology is galloping ahead. We've seen that very obviously with AI most recently, but there is still a need to sort of bring that back, or to try and to align both to the speed of technology and the transformation power of technology with life, with policy, with government, with our ability to engage with each other. So there's sort of this push and pull between technology and broader life. Brook, you had a few things here that you wanted to say.
You know, I think one of the things that we've realised, having worked in this space for many years, is that there's been an underlying premise, for example, that real-time data and real-time control is not just feasible but desirable. And our experience has been that premise doesn't hold very often at all. In fact, the nature of life, the nature of government, the nature of policy, the nature of regulation, the nature of compliance, the nature of human attitudes is such that decision-making in particular often happens on cycles and iterations that are much, much slower than real time. A really, really obvious and boring example is smart parking, okay? We all had this amazing vision that, you know, smart parking would mean real-time information to everyone, real-time decision about conditions and pricing and so forth. That really hasn't occurred, not in a very meaningful way, not in a sustainable way, and indeed in many instances where it has occurred, not in a way that's been acceptable to the users. So we've got to start thinking, when we talk about smart city strategy and reimagining smart cities, what is the realistic alignment of use of technology at its speed versus how it aligns with the speed of life, the speed of decision making, the speed of change, the speed of acceptance. So I don't present all the answers here to you, but I certainly know from experience that if you go in thinking that everything needs to be real time and we're going to rapidly drag decision making to real time, good luck. Good luck on that one, because you are absolutely fighting against the currents of history and of humanity. So I think enough said on that one. And am I still going here?
Yeah.
Is it still me?
Yeah.
It's still me. Okay. All right. Just quickly, colleagues, I think there's been a tendency, both strategically and operationally in the smart city space, that we're in the smart city slot. So when we're doing our thinking and our designing, we need to come up with a smart city solution. Otherwise, we've failed. As smart city practitioners, as theorists, as executives, as strategists, we have failed. In our view, smart city thinking is as much a catalyst of different types of change, of different types of solutions, as it is a solution in and of its own sake. And it shouldn't matter to you if your smart city thinking, your smart city process, your smart city strategy actually ends up generating an information solution, a comm solution, a regulatory solution, a policy solution, a legislative solution, a collaborative solution. That is, in our view, quite positive, more than acceptable, and should be something that everyone is comfortable with. Again, if we get in the track of the narrow thinking, our smart city activity must end and must ultimately demonstrate a smart city solution, then to me, I think we've got blinkers on, and we are disallowing a whole bunch of other possibility, and we're also undervaluing the byproducts and externalities of smart city thinking and smart city strategy. And I think this is me as well, if I'm not mistaken. We're almost 2 more slides, colleagues. Now, I think it's worth understanding and appreciating and recognizing that when we talk about smart city strategy, we need to understand there has been a significant, if not minority, dialogue of general discomfort, concern with the prevalence of smart tech in our cities. Now, a lot of this, of course, borders on conspiracy theory and those who perhaps don't fully appreciate the controls that are in place to ensure that smart city investment is not undermining privacy and security and creating a big brother state. Nonetheless, I think it is worthy of just acknowledging that this discomfort exists and ensuring that our strategy works within this constraint and moves at the speed of humanity to the extent that is necessary and helps push that along to the extent that is beneficial and sensible. I think it is very dangerous to just pretend that this natural human discomfort is crazy, is fringe, and is totally off topic. Some elements of it are, yes, of course, but it reflects a natural human inclination to just be careful and be judicious and to move things along at a speed that we can squeeze the benefit out of, but make sure the risks are also being taken into account. So let's not be dismissive of some of this human discomfort. Let's embed it. Let's get on the front foot in our smart city strategies, and let's make sure that we are using tech to better humanity, not to actually feather the nests of some very wealthy minority themselves, while also making the rest of humanity quite uncomfortable. And finally, I think a way of just summing all this up, I think in terms of reimagining smart cities, I think the theme of this conversation presentation today has been very much that smart city strategy has its place for a specific purpose to accelerate your use of smart technology, to protect you against the risks of smart technology, but it also has broader benefit for your organisation, for your city, for your region. Positive externalities, I'm an economist, sorry for that jargon there, but it's a great way of branding your city in terms of promoting it as a place of innovation, a place of activity, attracting investment, improving your reputation as an organisation to attract employees and to retain them, to drive internal innovation more generally, to promote other non-tech related reforms, and also I've mentioned before, to identify broader technology and non-technology risks and to mitigate those and manage those into the future. So our strong view remains that smart technology dedicated or embedded in other technology, strategic documents is extremely valuable for a whole range of reasons. We thank you for your time and attention. I hope this has given you a few other ways of thinking about strategic planning for smart cities, smart communities, smart regions. We welcome any initial comments or questions or offline as well. Robin, over to you to coordinate and facilitate any questions or discussion.
Yeah, sure. So George did put in a follow-up to his question, which really I think relates to a lot of what you've just said now and at the beginning, that there needs to be a business case built initially before even going to executives. And I think that that's something that we can certainly play a role in helping a lot of organizations develop and doing some of that advocacy work. I love that you touched on the community aspect. Look, the conspiracy theories will persist, but these sessions I think are really important to help us all reframe the narrative and remember that it's not a thing. We're not becoming a smart city in any city, region, or town. It's an approach to problem solving. It's a strategic approach, and it's a journey or approach to work. And I love that you included communication at the very beginning as one of those key principles, because that's so key in ensuring that there is no alienation of sects of communities either. I can't see too many more questions, which is great and speaks a lot to how well you spoke. I think that we will probably get some further on. And so I'd like to ask you, Brooke, Anna, if perhaps we can schedule something else with one of your customers to share a specific strategy and look at how that's been developed and some of the ROI that's come out of that, or what the internal processes might have been. I think that would be really valuable to the group. And maybe some of the Atlas Telios outcomes as well, because those maturity assessments are so valuable. I will ask if you can share some of the links to the strategies that you reference, and we'll pop those into the show notes. But for now, I think, unless there are any more questions from the audience, we can probably wrap up a little bit early. But thank you so much for joining us. Brooke, Anna, do you want to leave us with a final definition of sorts?
Well, and I think the thing that we've learned doing this for almost a decade now, working on hundreds of strategies, but also studying cities around the world, is that the strategic approach, the maturity-based approach, does make a difference. It does embed it in the organisation, and it leaves a legacy. I think that's the really important point that I'd like to say, is there's a little bit of a sense sometimes that smart city activity is actually about building resumes for those who are involved, so that they can quickly move on to the next job. For those who are interested in impact and public policy and making our cities better, the legacy that you leave should be the testimony that you want to get out of your smart city activity. Taking the strategic approach will give you that legacy, will give you that enduring impact. And I think that's something that, you know, we can all be very positive and aspirational about at the end of the day, Robin. So we commend the approach to you. We hope that you've enjoyed the presentation. We look forward to further conversations in the future.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to everyone who's joined us. I will share the recording and contact information if you have any questions directly for Brooke and Anna, and look forward to seeing you all online again soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, colleagues. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Cheers.